Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to the October 4th, 2012 regular meeting of the Olathe Public Schools Board of Education. Ms. Hibbs, would you take the roll, please?
Ms. Ashley?
Here.
Dr. Daniels?
Here.
Mrs. Felter?
Here.
Mrs. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Poland?
Here.
Mr. Scheer?
Here.
Would everyone rise, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business this evening will be a report on demographic and enrollment information, and I believe Mr. Hutchison and Ms. Lyon are going to make the presentation.
Good evening. We drew straws and Rita pulled all the information for the report, and I have to stand before you and present the information. So she'll definitely be up here when we get to questions and answers. Just starting out with a quick reminder who we serve. As you can tell from the map, we actually take on 4 different cities. We cover Lenexa, Shawnee, Olathe, and unincorporated Johnson County. As you can see, the largest area is Olathe in purple there. Apologize, Dr. Barrett, I realized I was supposed to change that to blue and forgot to. If we take a closer look at that, how we're made up, really 66% of the square miles in Olathe fall in Olathe City. Another 19% fall in Lenexa, and we have 8% in Overland Park. But when you look at it from a student basis, 83% of our students come from Olathe and 10% come from Overland Park. If we take a look at the September 20 counts, we have enrollment of 28,872 students. That represents a change of 583 students, so we're up about 2.1%. If you try to put that in perspective, we've got enrollment data going back to the 70s. In the 70s, we averaged about 306 students a year. Then we crept up to 580 in the 80s, 624 in the 90s. And our largest decade was the first decade of the new millennium. We averaged 736 a year. The 4 years of this decade, we're averaging about 494. So basically, when we're not growing, we're still growing. We've had 47 consecutive years of growth in this district. Not that it's a competition, but as far as Johnson County enrollments go, we are the largest school district in Johnson County, and actually we're the second largest district in the state. We have 2 of the 3 largest high schools in the state as well, in Olathe North and Olathe East. If we take a closer look at how our student enrollment is made up, if we look at where do those kids come from, kids that move into the district in grades 1 through 12 come from a variety of places. We have about 38% of those students come from other Johnson County public schools. They move into our district. We have about 28%, excuse me, I said that backwards, 28% from other public schools, and out of state is about 38%. And we get another 20% that come from outside our county, other places in Kansas. This past year, new coming students in grades 1 through 12 was just over 1,088. Last year was about 876. Now this is obviously a gross figure, and we have students move out, but it's always interesting to know where are they coming from when they're new to our district. When we look at our makeup, when we look at ethnicity and racial breakdown, we'll see that we're about 71% white, about 13.3% Hispanic, and about 7% African American. Looking at our special ed makeup, we have about 4,200 students. About 14.6% of our enrollment are served through special education. Students with disabilities make up 11.6% of that. And then we have 877 gifted students, or about 3% of our total enrollment. English language learners is another category that we track. In this year, English language learners, we have about 1,784 students, and that equates to about 975 FTE. Now, we have other students that receive some consultations in these services, but these are the students that we would receive funding on. That's about 6.2% of our enrollment. Compared to last year, we had about 1562, and we were at about 5.5%. So we've grown a little bit in that area. Looking at socioeconomic status, which is basically poverty and measured by free and reduced lunch counts, if you look at a percentage of our total enrollment, we are at about 27.23%. It's up from 26.4% last year. The good news is the percentage change is going down, and it's going down a little quicker than just because we're growing, the percentage is going down. We range from a school of 1.3% SES to a school of 86.9. And homeless, another category we track, is down a little bit from last year, 283 versus 310 last year. When we break down our enrollment by grade, what you'll see quickly from this chart is obviously our younger grades are much larger than our upper grades. If you look largest to smallest, our 12th grade class is at 1893, our smallest class. Our kindergarten class that's entering is at 2262, and our largest class is our second grade class at 2274. If you compare the top and bottom four, the senior high students and then K through 3, you'll quickly see that there's a difference of about 965 students. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. If you dig down a little deeper into those two numbers, you find out that our current senior class, like I said, is 1893. And they entered the district at 1515. So that means in the course of their career, from kindergarten to senior year, there were move-ins of 378 students. So we don't just pick up students through attrition. As we said, we had about 1,088 move in this past year. It nets a gain generally year after year, the number of students that move in versus leave our district. If you take a look at a 10-year average of what's that career look like from K through 12, our 10-year average was about 27.8%. Your class size, if you started at 1,000, you were going to go up 27.8% by the time you're a senior year. Currently, if we take a closer look at just our elementary, that's slowed. It's about 0.7% a year, or it'd work out to be about 7% annually. So if we take a look at attrition, that 965 that's coming through the system, and we take that 7% kind of conservative move-in rate, what that means is the orange is our current 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. If you layer on top of that the attrition that's going to come through the system and about a 7% move-in rate, the result is in 2021-22, when that kindergarten class first enters our high schools, we're going to have about 1,662 more high schoolers. If you say, well, that 7% is too conservative, rather than jump to the 28% that we averaged the last 10 years, let's pick 15%. What's the effect there? The effect basically is we'd have 10,300 high school students, or about 2,380 by the time those kindergartners make it there. So what's all that really mean? If we kind of look at that whole career that they're taking, right now we're sitting at 8,000 high school students. If we go to 2018-19, when the current third graders begin high school, we're going to be at about, if you take the conservative model, about 9,100. If you take the 15% model, we'll be at 9,500. By the time that third grade class, our seniors and our kindergartners enter the high school in 21-22, we'll be at 9,600 or up to about 10,300. That's a range of about 1,100 to 1,500 conservatively, or 1,500 to 2,300 change. Now granted, that's 6 years until those third graders hit the doors, and it's 9 years until the kindergarten class hits the doors. But the reality is it takes 5 years to figure out from the time you say go on a high school till it's open. So the window's kind of closing there. And I'll just let you soak that in while I ask Rita to come up and soak in take some questions. No, I'll come back, sorry.
Well, that's soaking. I was at a state meeting today, and they always like to go around the room sometimes and talk about enrollments for districts just to get a comparison. And are you up or down? How many? And districts will report being up, a handful to a dozen, and some are obviously down kids. And then when you come to Olathe, and we're up 583 people, I think their jaw just drops. If you were to take those 583 kids, put them all in one place, they would be larger than, by themselves, more than 150 school districts in Kansas. I mean, they don't have an enrollment of even 583 kids. So again, the growth that we are continuing to have is pretty amazing.
I have a question, but maybe Dr. Banikowski, who will answer it. I would like somebody to speak in terms of the challenges that the district encounters when new students enter midstream or mid-career in their learning process, as opposed to starting with the Olathe way at the beginning of their experience.
Certainly, it's always a challenge when a student moves in and has had a different curriculum, different experience. We're anticipating the Common Core should help equate that, so students will come in with a more common experience, but that will take some time through the system to do that. Students certainly come from different school districts. They have different expectations, both curriculum-wise as well as behavior-wise. We need to then work with those students to help them adapt to the Olathe way, as you affectionately call it. So it is a challenge for both the educator, but it's also a challenge for the student and the parent because it's different, the expectations. And that certainly doesn't mean that all students that come into our district are behind, or that they just may not have, they have gaps maybe from where our students do. And so it's just a different experience for our students. So it can be a challenge both for the educator and the student.
Okay, thank you.
An anecdotal story of a principal shared with me just recently. In the last 3 weeks or so, we had a family move in from a southern state, and a fourth grader could not read, and was not read well, but could not read. Being a regular ed student, that student will take the Kansas state assessments with us this spring. So again, as you talk, Dr. Daniels, about what kind of catch-up do we have and what are the challenges, it's definitely a challenge.
Mr. Hutchinson, I know we have a study session coming up later in October if the board approves that this evening as an action item. I would like to see these numbers broken down by high school. In other words, what would the projected enrollment be today based on these numbers for South, East, North, and Northwest? I think that will give us a true picture of what our high schools are going to look like based in how that squares with capacity in our high schools.
Absolutely. We're working on that right now, and I believe we could have that by the work session.
And include the current enrollments at those 4 high schools along with that
Certainly.
Projected number.
As we're obviously looking at high school number 5 with these numbers, I'd like to get some input onto what alternatives from a technology standpoint that we are considering also. Just throwing wild things out there. I think somebody mentioned once to me that, hey, the high schoolers learn better starting later in the day. Maybe we stretch the school day for that so that kids can sort of come and go on. I'm just throwing things out, but I just want to know what we're looking at from a technology standpoint to maybe maximize the space that we have now. So I don't know what it looks like for sure, but I think somebody out there probably does.
And do we know what is bringing this 1,088 from out of state into Olathe?
I don't believe we have a further breakdown other than just
It's our quality schools.
the quality schools.
It's a great place to live, but that would be something really interesting to see.
Send that to the
What the draw is.
Mm-hmm.
I had one other question. The special ed, in the category of students with disabilities, are these all students with IEPs? Every single student would have an IEP.
Yes.
And so they're a lot more expensive to educate.
Depending on the severity of the IEP.
Well, just the paperwork alone, let's just say, for example, that adds a
That is
whole
true.
additional, all the staff required at the meetings and, okay.
Is that all? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, Dr. Dugan is going to give us a presentation on providing safe and positive learning environments for our students.
Good evening. Numbers, budget, now positive behavior. Doesn't get better. I want to take just a little bit of time and thankful for the opportunity to talk to you guys a little bit about our district's positive behavior approach and what we're really talking about when we talk about that, both in terms of discipline, but behavior expectations, interventions, and supports. I brought it with me too. We have a student code of conduct, and so my conversation with you guys tonight is separate from this, but certainly supportive of each other. Board-approved student code of conduct really lays the standards for behavior expected of students, and violations of inappropriate behavior. It lays out the consequences and administrative options for that. What we believe as a district, though, and Dr. Berry even says it, and I won't be able to read it probably in the little print, but in his introductory letter to the student code of conduct, is that all of that is supported by kind of an umbrella of a positive philosophy of supports for students. And so my attempt tonight is to share a little bit with you, what are we talking about when we talk about positive behavior intervention and supports? It's an acronym, it's used often, but it has kind of a real global meaning, and it means lots of different things. So I'm going to take what can be days and days of training and spend just a couple of minutes giving you a snapshot of our district's approach with that, and then I'd be happy to take questions you might have. I want to start with talking about why a positive philosophy, and then what it really does PBIS look like and mean, and I'll share a couple examples in our schools. Each of our schools has a program of positive supports in place, and they all look vastly different from each other in theme and creativity, but I'll try and give you a bit of a flavor. Why a positive philosophy? Speaking of data-driven and research-based, the research is incredibly strong, comparing a positive approach to changing behavior compared to a punishing approach in changing behavior. And these things I listed are research-based, and they're simple, and we know these. This is intuitive to us kind of as people, but a positive attitude promotes better health. People with positive attitudes have more friends, research tells us. Projecting a positive attitude helps one handle stress and troubles better than having a negative attitude. The attitude you carry reflects on your appearance. Your attitude affects people around you. Positive thoughts are invigorating, well-researched. The last one, negative thoughts have a draining effect on other people. Negative thoughts make you gloomy. Research really, and it's a large body of research and it's been around a long time. Positive is good. We know that. And so we have taken on that philosophy that the adults can model being positive, and we can use a positive approach to change behavior. This is a little more theoretical. Dr. Daniels will jump in here and help me with some of this. Here's what the research tells us from a more theoretical standpoint. Positive reinforcers, giving someone a positive when they do something correctly or something you like, that strengthens and supports that response. So we want students to raise their hand and not do shout outs, okay? And when they raise their hand, we say, appreciate you raising your hand, what do you got for me? Okay, that's a positive reinforcer, and it increases the likelihood that student's gonna raise their hand again for us versus shouting out an answer. The opposite side of that is that using punishing response, and that sounds cruel, but it could be something as simple as, hey, put your hand down. That's not how you get my attention, okay? It doesn't teach the correct behavior, okay? But it does stop and suppress that inappropriate behavior for a time being, okay? Research also tells us that oftentimes the person doing the punishing becomes a punishment themselves. And probably the old adage with that is, in a household of a mother and a father, sometimes one, either the mother or the father, is more the disciplinarian. And it's the old things that, oh, wait till your father gets home, because father is the punisher in that, because one would expect then, or the thought being, that they're going to do something punishing because of your day's behavior. We would never want teachers or the adults in our students' lives to found that person, that adult, becomes a punishment to them. Also, what research clearly tells us about punishment is the person receiving punishment, it often in them elicits a very strong emotional reaction. And all of us know that in our daily lives. When something doesn't feel good, it kind of riles us up a little bit. And what we're seeing in students, the effects of punishment is that we get escalated inappropriate behavior, the ability to manage those emotional responses to punishment. Here's what the research says about what we're doing now. Research indicates that a positive preventative approach to behavior does a couple of things, and we're going to love these things. It decreases problem behavior. It increases time in academic instruction. It is associated with improved academic outcomes and improved grades, and increases school attendance. And the research here is really, really strong. That if you use this positive preventative approach, you're going to get these things. And these are the things we're looking for. We want better academic instruction. We want to decrease problematic behavior. We want better outcomes, and we want kids in our schools. Here's what we know about time and instruction. Again, this seems intuitive once we hear about it. The time spent in a non-positive mode, the time we're spending providing consequences to students from the classroom, sending them out of our classroom, we're actually sending them away from instruction. And we know that time and instruction is highly correlated to student achievement. Okay? And the research says that schools that have implemented a positive school-wide or classroom discipline program, a positive one, have reported up to a 57% increase in teacher instruction time. That teachers that have put in the time and the effort preventively and positively to manage a classroom have kids staying in their classroom, have kids raising hands and participating appropriately. And what research says is that appropriate behavior built on a positive approach increases our instruction time with them. Here's the not rocket science version of PBIS. This is what it is. It is one, positive relationships established with and among students. That teachers have great relationships and they're positive ones with their students, and students have positive relationships with each other. We've set forth clear expectations for behavior. Every student in that school knows what is expected of them, okay? And when I enter a classroom, I know the expectations for behavior. There's no guessing. You know, I was going to give an example, I'll come back to it later. The third piece of PBIS is teaching and modeling. We also know, and research tells us, that if we expect appropriate behavior, that we also need to teach that behavior and model that behavior. That gone are the days of assuming that any given student knows what is appropriate in school. We need to spend some time early on teaching them what's appropriate behavior in school, what's appropriate behavior in a first grade classroom, what's appropriate behavior in a calculus class. That we need to go ahead and be very explicit and teach and model that. And then when that appropriate behavior occurs, we need to reinforce it. And I'll talk a little bit about the reinforcement systems look different from elementary school to high school. And then the final piece, which is so appropriate, and it's really how the research is, that there's a collection of data that's required. If a student isn't responding appropriately to positive supports, there is a data collection system, a functional behavior analysis that looks at what's the function of that student's behavior and what other unique interventions or supports do we need to put in place. Okay, that's not the majority of our students. The majority of our students are responding very well, very positively to these simple steps. I want to expand a little bit more and then kind of give some closing comments. Teaching appropriate behavior is the piece that I think some adults find new. The time we spent investing in teaching the appropriate behavior, we set the expectations, we teach it. What do I talk about when I'm talking about teaching appropriate behavior to students? Okay, beyond what their parents and family are doing. And this is part of the training for our staff has been, staff must be active, engaged in supervision. The only way to catch inappropriate behavior and to reinforce appropriate behavior is to be out there and among students and seeing it and catching it, good or bad, correcting it quickly and teaching new behavior. And so our biggest emphasis in the last 3 years has been reviewing and refreshing what active and engaged supervision looks like for staff at all levels. We're directly and explicitly teaching appropriate behavior. We have very recently done kind of a district-wide training on the Boys Town social skills. Okay, so the student that is using some disrespectful language to another student or a teacher maybe doesn't know what skill, social skill they should use to share their disappointment with some feedback they got. Okay, but we've learned now to stop the inappropriate behavior, but we need to teach them a replacement skill, and that's been part of our most recent trainings. And then very importantly, we talk about our adults and all adults that are in the lives of our students have to be modeling very appropriate behavior. We know this as parents and grandparents and teachers. They're always watching us. They're always watching us. And so we've really stressed in our training with staff is you have to be the model of positive behavior across the learning environment. And then the last piece in teaching appropriate behavior is when appropriate behavior happens, someone's got to reinforce it fairly consistently. Someone's got to say, hey, that was great. Hey, that met my expectations. I want to talk a little bit about what those reinforcement systems look like. Some of you that are familiar with our elementary schools, there's very colorful, creative PBIS systems. The pause program, if the mascot is an animal with a paw, and you earn paws and you post your paws for meeting school-wide and classroom expectations. And then classrooms may have different systems of reinforcing students. By middle school, there's less of a token in terms of reinforcement. Now it's more social praise, because middle schoolers like that social aspect, and sometimes some written praise from a teacher, a form you get that says, hey, I caught you doing this today, and that was awesome. And by high school, again, it's a lot of social praise from your teachers and from each other reinforcing that behavior. I did want to mention that PBIS, again, it looks different in lots of places, and we sprinkle it with lots of other things, and you've heard about some of those things recently. Obviously, we're continuing messages, and Olathe has been doing this for as long as I've been here, about respect and honesty and kindness and compassion. Certainly recently with either Rachel's Challenge or our bully prevention, we continue to sprinkle that message into what we're doing more systematically at all our schools. We're using interventions for those students for whom that's not enough, using interventions that are based on data and analysis of the function of behavior, and some folks that really specialize in being able to do that well. Certainly, we have student guiding principles that fit beautifully with this sense of being positive. Rachel's Challenge has certainly sent and a really strong message recently on kindness and compassion. A curriculum at the elementary level, Steps to Respect, that really is specifically addressing respectful behavior, appropriate behavior, and some bullying pieces there. And then most recently, again, I mentioned at the middle school, we did a full training. Every middle school teacher received training this fall on 16 Boys Town social skills and how to implement them with middle school students. High school's been involved in that for a while. Last two slides here, a couple examples. And so these are the things you hear about. PBIS is not one program. It's a combination and a philosophy that's implemented. Boys Town is a positive behavior approach. Then there's actually a center called Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. We did Safe and Civil Schools training at the middle and high school level 3 years ago, really on that active and engaged supervision. The Positive Classroom is our own invention 3 years ago, taking all the research best practices on classroom management, obviously Rachel's Challenge, and that's a picture of our Steps to Respect curriculum that just we're coming at it from all sorts of angles in our schools. And then these last slides are some pictures that look better on my screen than on the big screen. But middle schools and high schools and how they've set up their school-wide expectations and how those cross into their classroom expectations, and they're all written in a positive manner. Gone are the days of the rules are no running. It doesn't tell me what I'm supposed to do. To us, that's obvious. You'll be walking. But we're really pushing that. I'm going to tell you exactly what our rules and expectations are. And students, the far right corner, I believe, is Northview Elementary, and they specifically have a matrix up. And so every common area in their school, they've outlined as a staff, what are our expectations? How do we walk down the hallway? What do we expect when we're getting something from the water fountain, using the restroom? And many, many of our elementary schools have gone through this same process. These are middle schools. Again, our friend of Rachel's club signs are already up, so I had to toss in one of those pictures. They were meeting Thursday at 7:15, so we missed it this morning. And then again, the colored squares around that whiteboard is all the 16 social skills that a team's reviewing during one of their team times. With that, I take any questions.
Dr. Newman, you know, as you mentioned, I mean, we're doing a great job in the schools and working with the teachers and educating the teachers and how to work with the students and things such as that. Can you speak to what we're doing from the parent standpoint? Because again, that positive reinforcement at home is going to be even be more important. And what are we doing to get out to the parents to give them some of these trainings that were given available to the teachers?
Most of the elementary schools, and I'll talk kind of elementary and I'll give some middle school and high school examples. Can we do tons and tons of it? We need to be, and I think we continue to do that, engage our parents. Site councils, back to school nights, spend a lot of time talking about, here's my classroom management system. I use a positive behavior support system. A lot of, Cedar Creek Elementary always celebrated what their school-wide comment program was with the parents at parent nights. Again, parents that are attending those things are getting that information, flyer going home, and so continue to promote that kind of piece. Middle school, I was at one of the middle school feeder site councils, and they had each of the schools share with their site council what the middle school is doing in the elementaries in terms of positive support. So I think they continue to put the information out there, whether or not we're reaching all the parents. That continues to be a question. We've done training, parent kind of behavior training. Special ed continues to put on some regular parent training sessions. And some of the best attended are our ones on how to handle behavior. Not surprising, parents come in droves for that. And the positive approach has been part of those trainings as well. So.
Well, and I think that continues to be the challenge because life is life and people are very, very busy. But again, I don't want to lose focus on that, and I do think reaching out to the community and reaching out to the parents, and we only have so many resources, I know that, but at the same time, if we could continue to focus on that, that makes a huge difference. And Rachel's challenge, I think, has been a good start to that because we have had that opportunity to reach out, and from what I've seen and what I've heard, we're getting a lot more participation from the families and parents and things such as that. And sometimes it's just that shot in the arm. You can't do it all the time. But being able to continue to do that makes a big difference.
You bet. And excited kids go home and tell parents. So we have a captive audience to possibly be messengers home when we keep them pretty fired up about being positive and kind in those pieces. So it's a great point.
And it's not just fluffy feel-good stuff. It's not great job, Fred. It's Fred, I noticed that you raised your hand, and that was great because you didn't disrupt the class, right?
You've got that down very well.
Is that, well, that's the only way the kid will know why was it a great job if you dig deeper. So we're going that deep is what you're saying?
In intermittently.
Okay.
The research is going to tell you a couple things. One, if you look at a kid and you just go, I saw that, good job, that is incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. Relationships with kids tell us what they need. Some kids need more explicit feedback. That's a feedback in terms of, hey, I really liked it when you did this. Mm-hmm. In a crazy teacher's day and 20-some, 30-some kids in a classroom, we may not be giving descriptive feedback.
Not all the time.
But you know your students and you know what they need, and that's why the first thing in positive supports is having relationships with your students, because you have to know what they need back from you so it's reinforcing. Some kids is that look, that wink, that thumbs up, the pat as you walk by them. That made their day. That's all they needed.
Right, but if it's all just that, it's shallow, and kids know that. They're bright. Right. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm great. And it helps to have data for the kid to know, oh, that's good because of this. And you wouldn't, of course, have the time to do that. But the connection piece, to me, that's life-changing. It's great to have the parent involvement, but we can't really control that. We can invite it and communicate. Sure. But it's to teach that child, okay, when I give feedback, this is how I need to do it. So I love this. This is what I'm about. I live here, and this is where I think we'll change the world. This could be that spark. It needs to be deep, rich, and real, and not just fluff. And I get that from you, that's what it is, but I just want, we don't have privy to what the 16 principles are.
The social skills from Boys Town?
Yeah.
I'd be happy to share those. And then, there's the 10 essential features of the positive classroom. I mean, it's kind of endless how we package this, and you'll see great overlap. But no, I'd be happy to share any of those things.
Well, it sounds wonderful, but it's also easy to sound fluffy, you know?
I appreciate you bringing that up. I think sometimes people think, well, be nice. Research really supports this approach, and it certainly supports this approach in schools for changing behavior. It's well researched, so it's more than fluff.
I love that, and I think it's critical. Now, the data collection, is it a software program that you were talking about? You mentioned specifically for school attendance, the 57% classroom instruction time?
It's pulled from all different data sources.
Okay.
So buildings maintain their own number of discipline referrals. Okay, that we feed that into a larger district system, and we report that to the state on certain types of reportable offenses. But we track number of office referrals as the data system, and the schools have that. Schools do a variety of data collection systems on their own PBIS program. So that's kind of at the local level, controlled at the building level. Some of the other implementation pieces, certainly we have attendance within our student information system that we can pull by school. We have a discipline dashboard that's on every principal's computer that they can run graphs and check where's the behavior occurring, what grade level, is there a teacher for whom we're getting more referrals than another. Yeah, that system's been built in system-wide and at the fingertips of all of our administrators.
Good, good. And will we be able to attribute the impact of this to the certain scores? I mean, do we have a profile that we're trying to target these indicators as being impacted by this program that we can track?
Part of the problem is isolating this variable, okay? Because we've been, we just do lots of great stuff, and we're systematic in doing lots of great stuff in terms of we wanted to have certain attributes and characteristics. It needs to be positive, it needs to be reinforcing, it needs to be realistic and doable by a teacher. Kids need to, and so we've seen as a district whole, our number of discipline referrals are reducing. So that's the trend line we're looking at largely. And then we're looking at things like our climate surveys. Do parents and students and staff feel like we have safe, positive environments? And our results look very positive. So we're watching kind of those surveys. Was it just the Rockstar program at Indian Trail, which is their PBS program? I don't know, because they've done a variety of things. It's like monitoring Rachel's challenge impact.
Right.
I think it's going to be amazing. I can't isolate it to know, is it responsible for changes, or is it all these things we've done?
It's just part of the fabric kind of who we are, but it'd be great if we could track it and, spread the word. You never know.
Sure.
The impact. Thank you very much.
Going from the theoretical level down to the reality level.
Sure.
Help me understand with, as more and more pressures are put on our teachers for academic achievement. I know this is supposed to going to help them enable this, but a lot of times probably the schools that might, I got to watch how I say this, but with the schools that might need this the most may have the greatest number of students that need it the most. And how is that teacher supposed to now accomplish the learning end of it, but also do this when she or he's got, somebody acting up over in the corner here, where Johnny over here is just doing a great job, and she's about ready to club him over here, but she's got to then turn a positive attitude.
No clubbing in our positive philosophy.
I guess that's speaking of my house.
I get it.
My household.
Yes,
Sorry
that's
about that.
It's a great question, and I think you'll continue to see research articles on this. The time invested by a teacher, there's some initial time investment for teaching, setting clear expectation, teaching, modeling, reinforcing. Okay, so there's an initial startup time, which we've invested already across our school district, okay? The comparison is to the ongoing, oops, what are you doing? Stop what you're doing. That's actually more time. So the research is fairly clear on this. When you get over the initial investment of time, that over time it takes less time to maintain a preventative positive approach than stopping instruction, doing this, removing them to the office, filling out a referral form, and we taught them nothing new. So they come back tomorrow, and we're going to have the same repeat. So it's not intuitive, but the time savings is in the positive preventive approach. So we have a better chance of when you have a school or a classroom, and again, mainly it might be a classroom that has a number of students that we're helping change some behavior. This is still has the most impact on doing that.
So are principals monitoring how teachers are implementing this in the classroom?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In the classroom, so school-wide expectations, the principals have been involved in.
Right.
A checklist of the 10 essential features of a positive classroom. We've tried to keep it simple so it can be monitored. And so during our walkthroughs and our data walks, a principal's looking for 10 things that research tells us should be happening and we should be able to see in a positive classroom.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good stuff.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes before break. Would everyone like to push through? Our consent agenda has 5 items: minutes, our monthly reports, and textbooks for our Japanese language program. Would any board members like to pull any of these items for discussion or separate vote? All right, then I would accept a motion.
I'd move to approve consent agenda items numbered 5.01 to 5.05 as presented.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Mr. Poland and a second by Dr. Daniels. Would you call the roll?
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Motion carries. 6.01, approval of technology services and maintenance agreements. Are board members comfortable taking a vote on this now?
Madam President, I'd like to hold that until after the break because I have a number of questions that I would like to ask Ms. Lyon before we voted on that.
Sounds good. What about 6.02? Ready to go forward? All right, I would entertain a motion on 6.02, approval of network electronic bids.
I move that we award the bid for replacement of network electronics and hardware in the amount of $67,274.40 to Alexander Open Systems as presented.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Ms. Ashley, a second by Mr. Parker. Would you call the roll?
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Motion carries. Can we do one more? All right, 6.03, approval of track repair at ODAC. Questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I would move.
Does this come out of capital outlay?
It does.
Thank you.
I would move to accept the low bid from McConnell and Associates in the amount of $87,655 for track repairs at ODAC.
Second that.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Dr. Daniels and a second by Ms. Felter. Would you call the roll?
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
All right, thank you. With that, we will take a quick comfort break and reconvene here at 7 o'clock. I encourage everyone to go out and look at the faculty art reception in the lobby. Thank you. Thank you. Next, we're going to have recognitions and awards. Director of Communications, Maggie Kolb, is going to be making the presentation with the help of Mr. Mike Poland.
Good evening. We have 2 groups to recognize tonight. I'd like to welcome all of our distinguished guests. We're going to begin our recognitions tonight with a business partner that has provided outstanding opportunities to students in our 21st century animal health program. Tonight we honor and thank the Kansas City Zoo. I'd like to ask Heather Schoonover from Community Development to come forward to help with the recognitions. I'd also like to ask James Estes, facilitator for the Animal Health Program, to come forward, along with Kelly Martin, School and Outreach Coordinator from the Kansas City Zoo. The Kansas City Zoo partners with our Animal Health Program to give students opportunities to be a part of an animal health career study. 40 Animal Health Program students participated in the initial zoo camp this past summer. Sophomores are able to learn about careers related to animal health, conservation, species survival plans, marketing, and zoo careers. Juniors are able to learn firsthand field research skills, creating and working with ethograms to monitor animal behavior. The Animal Health Program is in its 4th year and is housed at Olathe North High School. And we thank the Kansas City Zoo for the opportunities you provide to our students in the Olathe Public Schools. Thank you. Our next recognitions tonight honor very important Olathe Public Schools alumni. Outstanding alumni are selected annually by the Olathe Public Schools Alumni Association with the Wall of Honor recognition. In addition to Heather Schoonover, I'd like to ask Ed Badsky, Olathe Alumni Association President, to come forward to help with the recognitions. The purpose of this prestigious award is to recognize Olathe School District alumni for their lifetime achievements. These individuals were recognized last night at a special induction ceremony. And in addition to the Alumni Awards, this is also the first year of the Alumni Association recognizing an individual with the Distinguished Person of Honor Award for his exceptional support to the district over the years. Wall of Fame honorees, when I call your name, please come forward, or the name of the family member you're representing, please come forward. And then stay at the front, and we're going to get a big group photo at the end. We'll begin tonight with Donald E. Davis Jr., an Olathe South 1991 graduate. After earning team MVP honors as a football player at South, where he was also class president and a member of the basketball and track teams, Don was a 3-year starter at the University of Kansas. His professional football career included stints with the New Orleans Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, St. Louis Rams, and New England Patriots. He helped the Patriots win Super Bowl 38 and Super Bowl 39. Wow. In 2004, he received the Ernie Tavila Award from the Athletes in Action Sports Ministry Organization. After his playing career, Don was the Patriots' assistant strength and conditioning coach and team chaplain. He later became director of NFL programs for Pro Athletes Outreach, and in 2010 became a regional director for the National Football Players Association. Congratulations. Our next honoree is Robert J. Enright, a John P. St. John Memorial High School 1947 graduate. Bob's daughter, Linda Allenbrand, is accepting on his behalf this evening. Bob was a line foreman for Kansas Power and Light for 36 years, but his passion was Olathe's history. A member and leader of the Johnson County and Olathe Historical Societies, Bob collected Olathe newspapers and compiled a 100-page scrapbook of old photographs, articles, facts, letters, and legends about Olathe, as well as a bicentennial calendar. As a member of Johnson County Old Settlers Committee, Bob's treasures were on display every year. He was active in establishing the Mahaffey Stagecoach Stop and Farm and donated a substantial amount of memorabilia to its collection. He was a longtime member of the All School Alumni Association, organizing many reunions and assembling several directories, and he belonged to the Earl Collier, American Legion Post 153, Masonic Lodge number 65, and Sons of the Union Soldiers of the Civil War. Congratulations. Our next honoree is H. Thomas Payne, a John P. St. John Memorial High School 1948 graduate, and Tom's daughter, Missy Schaffer, is accepting the award in his behalf. Paperboy, soda jerk, Eagle Scout, clarinet player, and thespian were among Tom's identities in high school. As a student at the University of Kansas, he excelled academically, was a fraternity officer, head cheerleader, member of the debate team, and held a varsity record in the breaststroke. After serving in the Navy during the Korean War, he finished college at KU. In 1957, he attended KU's law school and was editor-in-chief of the Law Review. Tom practiced law for many years at Payne & Jones Law Firm in Olathe. He was a Rotarian, board member for multiple banks, city attorney from 1960 to 1961. He served on the board of editors for the Journal of the Kansas Bar Association, sat on the advisory board of the KU Museum of Natural History, and was a member of the General Society of Mayflower Descendants and the Kansas Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. Congratulations. Next, we recognize Rhonda Rice, an Olathe North 1984 graduate and now an Olathe North teacher. For more than 2 decades, Rhonda has shared her knowledge and excitement of learning. She created the Faraday Society at Olathe North High School for current and former high school students to present chemistry demonstrations for a variety of audiences. She was a science consultant for the Kansas City Museum and earned its Teacher of the Year honor in 1999. She was the District 3 Kansas Teacher of the Year in 1997 and earned the Krista McAuliffe Fellowship from the Kansas Department of Education in 1999. The Olathe North Honor Society Norman L. Rice Award was bestowed upon her in 2004, and in 2011, her students won the secondary school category of the Battle of the Brains competition and earned a $50,000 grant for their school. Congratulations. Next, we recognize Nancy Milburn Schultz, a John P. St. John Memorial High School 1952 graduate. Nancy was a high school athlete and later coached girls softball. There was no interscholastic or city teams for girls in Gardner at the time, so she started a softball league for girls ages 13 to 15 and a girls basketball team. This later grew to include more sports for girls and boys and other age groups. She was a 4-H leader and served on the Johnson County 4-H board from 1965 to 1979. In 1967, she became a school bus driver and was named R.W. Harmon's first driver trainer in 1978, where she wrote training manuals for the bus company. Her awards include the National Safety Council's Distinguished Service Award, the Kansas State Pupil Transportation Association's Lifetime Achievement Award, First Students Woman of the Year in 2010, and in 2011 she received the Distinguished Service Award from the National School Transportation Association. Congratulations. Next, we recognize Gregory Sheffer, an Olathe South 1989 graduate. Greg graduated from Mid-America Nazarene College in 1993 with a degree in secondary education and social studies. He was a student teacher at Olathe North High School and a substitute teacher in the district from 94 to 96. He continued his studies at Nazarene Theological Seminary and earned a Master's of Religious Education in 1996. His interest in history and filmmaking led him to create Inversion Productions in 2004. Greg's honors include Telly Awards, a Davy Award, Omni Awards, and Aurora Awards. Lone Elm was runner-up at the 2007 Kansas City AMC Film Fest for Best Narrative Short. The Bricklayer won Best Documentary Short at the 2011 AMC Theaters Film Fest. And Olathe, the City Beautiful, won 3 2011 Mid-America Regional Emmys. Congratulations. And our final recognition tonight is of Ralph Dennis, who is being recognized with the Distinguished Person of Honor Award. Ralph's 43 years as an educator in Olathe junior and senior high schools from 1948 to 1991 were marked by achievement, service, and compassion. He grew up in Parsons, Kansas, attended Pittsburgh State, and started his career in Olathe. In addition to teaching social studies, he coached football, basketball, and tennis. Other extracurricular involvement included senior class sponsor, Kansas Association for Youth, and Future Teachers of America. Ralph's good humor and service earned him many public honors, such as Emporia State University Master Teacher, Kansas State High School Activities Association Hall of Fame, Olathe Community Pride Award, and the Olathe Citizen of the Year. Congratulations.
Yeah, maybe 2 rows. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Rob's tall enough.
And thank you to each of you for being such wonderful examples of alumni we have in the Olathe Public Schools. Thank you.
I didn't. Graduated before I lived in this school. 91.
At each regular meeting, the Board of Education reserves limited time for individuals wishing to address the board. We request that individual speakers limit their comments to 5 minutes. The clerk will monitor the time and notify the speaker when the 5-minute time limit has expired. Please direct your comments to the entire board. If a response is appropriate, the president will respond or refer to another individual. In an effort to respect the privacy, we ask that speakers refrain from discussing personal complaints involving individual staff members or students. Those speaking are advised that public comments are videotape recorded for broadcast on the district's educational access channel and audio tape recorded as a matter of public record. Individuals addressing the board should come to the podium at the front of the room and state your name and address. No one has signed up in advance, but we have time to hear comments right now if anyone would care to. Okay, thank you. Now, I'd like to jump backwards on our agenda to 6.01, approval of technology services and maintenance agreements, and I believe Mr. Parker had some questions.
Thank you. Ms. Line, I would just like for you to inform the board, this is a big item, 1.7 million. I want to assure the public that our staff has done a good job of reviewing all of the license agreements, and anything that is outdated or something that is not being utilized by the staff in the schools or the buildings has appropriately been discontinued, and we're not paying for license agreements for old software agreements that are no longer being utilized to the kind of capacity that we would expect to be utilized.
You know, we kind of have a front row hands-on seat to all of these things. We use them on a daily basis. We support them at the help desk. We install them. We maintain them. We monitor their usage. So I can guarantee you that there isn't anything on here that isn't being used. We review every one of these. We work with the teaching and learning department. A good example of one that has dropped off your list, I worked with Luann Hermrich and Nancy Hughes, the math coordinator. We had a software on the list last year that was called Compass Learning Math. And over the last 3 years, the usage of that software had declined. And we reevaluated it and just determined that the usage did not warrant the amount of maintenance that we were paying on that. So we absolutely monitor every one of these all the time. They're right in front of us every day, so we really know what's going on with them. If they're a subscription-based service, we have ways to pull reports of the usage, not only on a daily basis, but monthly and throughout the year. So we keep track of all of that, and we know what's going on with all of the software.
Right. So we can be confident then that as we approve this list of licensing and maintenance agreements, that we're approving items that are being utilized and maybe highly is maybe not a good adjective, but appropriately utilized for a reasonable return on the amount of money that we're spending for the, and there's a benefit for somewhere for the staff or students or teacher or administrative leadership.
Most of this is really back-end applications and hardware that most people, most of our users don't see. It's just what's behind the scenes, keeping everything up and running. But certainly we keep it all monitored, and there's another big long list of things that we don't maintain a service agreement on or a maintenance agreement on it. We've kept that in-house. You don't see a lot with our digital classrooms on this list. Our projectors, for example, we keep all of that in-house, and we do all that internally, so we don't maintain a service agreement with an outside vendor. So there's a whole other long list of things that doesn't generate some money that we're paying out to do that. So, I would say if something isn't used at least 30 to 40% of the time, we're not paying a maintenance agreement on it. Or if we can service it ourselves, we certainly will do that.
Right. I appreciate that because, it's easy just from year to year, just keep renewing things. And even though they may become somewhat obsolete, we're still paying for that. And so it's good to know and to assure our public that we're just buying license agreements that we definitely need to monitor to run this school district.
My staff hears from me regularly about, are we using this? How much are you using this? Are you sure we're using it this much money's worth? We keep a pretty close eye on it.
All right, good enough. Thank you.
Is there an official audit process that we go back? Again, the only reason because it is such a large dollar amount. I mean, so what process do we go through to make sure that we are maintaining this?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
Like
audit from like our financial auditors or?
Not necessarily.
Or internal auditing.
Yeah, an internal auditing saying, okay, yes, because again, just like with anything else in life, that, I think that I'm using it, but I may not be using it.
Yeah, and any software that we have, we can pull usage reports on how much that application is being used. On the hardware side, it's really whether that piece of equipment is a piece of equipment that we are relying on to keep the district up and running all the time. Like I said, if it's something that, if that piece of hardware failed today, could we do without it for 24, 48 hours, even up to a week while we repaired it ourselves or got somebody in, hired somebody in to repair it? If it's something that's keeping the network running, it's keeping security up, it's protecting us from viruses and those kinds of things. With a 24/7 shop that we are, we can't take those risks to have things down for very long. If it's that kind of software or hardware, then of course we want to maintain that at the highest level possible. So that's kind of the internal auditing that we do. And these are agreements that come due throughout the entire year. You might see other districts that are bringing these things to the board monthly. Instead of doing that to prevent you from seeing these every single month over and over again, we're maintaining the list on an annual basis, not to ever exceed this amount.
Thank you for doing it annually and not.
It's easier for us too.
If there are no more questions, I would entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the technology service and maintenance agreements for the next 12 months as presented.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Mr. Parker and a second by Mr. Scheer. Would you take the roll, please?
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felcher?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. The next 3 items on our agenda are proposed to be funded out of our 2007 bonds. So Mr. Hutchison is going to give us a quick update on the status of that bond.
I went high-tech on this one. Just a quick update on the 2007 bond and then a few more comments, and Dr. Dugan also has a brief presentation following. The 2007 bond, I apologize to the audience, but it was a big bond issue, so there's a lot of projects, so I'll try to read through this. Basically, we had a $138 million bond issue for 2007. And in that bond issue, we had categories of land and new construction and additions and renovations and money for aging facilities and technology. We've completed many of those projects, anywhere from we had a new construction of a 9th middle school, which is now known as Mission Trail. We had elementary number 34, which is Forest View. We had elementary 35 in the Tech Support Center, which is a pending project right now that we'll be discussing in just a few agenda items. We had numerous additions and renovations, mainly in the elementary realm around classroom without door projects. And we've also worked on aging facilities and technology. So we have 2 pending projects and a few future projects left. Otherwise, we have spent $97 million on completed projects. We have pending of $18 million, and we have future of $11.1. All of you good mathematicians up there, if you do the math, you find out that's only $126.1 million. That's not $138 million. That's because over the course of this bond issue, it's been great timing for construction, and through efficient scope changes, we've saved $11.9 million along the way thus far. In working with the board, that 11.9 has really been reallocated across to additional projects. And what the public can't read very well is in red, we are taking on 4 more elementary schools that are of that vintage of classroom without doors. We have 9 elementaries remaining. We're scheduling work for 4 of those, and you have an agenda item on that this evening, so we'll be down to 5 that we need to address. We've taken care of our penthouse multi-zone units, the HVAC systems that you approved a couple months ago. Funds are reallocated to that. And food production in order to expand the facility to meet our growing needs in that area. That's a quick status of the bond issue. One of the projects within there is Elementary 35, which is this particular agenda item. The reason that's coming before you this evening is there are several growth pressures that present themselves that have moved us to the point of requesting that a construction manager be hired to begin construction of Elementary 35. The growth pressures really revolve around 3 schools today and a 4th in the future. Ravenwood's currently over capacity. We've built out their wet areas, and they are continued on a growth trend, but as we stand today, they're above their capacity. Forest View and Meadow Lane are on track with their projections, but their projections are being updated because they're growing at a faster rate. As you'll see in a moment, there's a lot of new construction permit activity in those areas. So they too will soon reach their capacity. Woodland has space. It has some space, but it has signs of pending growth, which I'll explain in just a moment. This chart, the red is to date, calendar to date, how many new permits have been issued at Forest View, Meadow Lane, Ravenwood, and Woodland attendance areas. The blue is all of last year. So as I said earlier, Forest View, Meadow Lane are kind of spiking in their activity of permits that are issued. If you drive around Forest View, I think you'll see a lot more foundations going in, and it's very noticeable. Even Ravenwood is seeing that. Woodland is not seeing that currently. What's sending up the red flags around Woodland, and once again even Ravenwood, is this map right here. The purple shaded areas represent an area where sewer lines are currently being run. And why that signals development is the landowners immediately have to start paying for that service. So developers or landowners don't ask the water company to bring those facilities into their land until they're ready to start construction or ask for zoning or plat out for a development. So that's signaling to us that that area is going to enter into our calculations in the next couple of years to figure out how quickly the Woodland's going to reach its capacity. There's also financial considerations around Elementary 35. As I've indicated to the board, there are some state and local fundings that will help us as we transition to our 35th elementary. Between CODA and new facility weightings, we will average $1.6 million for 5 years. Revenue that helps us or assists us open the school, get it running before we're on our own to pay for the operational costs. The board will also have additional LOB authority of about $500,000 during that 5-year period. It will cost us an additional $1.1 million to operate the school. So for the first years, that will be more than covered. That's assuming we staff from within. Now, that doesn't mean a school loses a principal and we put them in that school. It's really most of the classroom teachers and parents, if kids are moving from one school to this new facility, you should be able to transition staff as well and keep the cost in that $1 million range. The result of all that is, as you phase in over that 5 years and we get that diminishing amount of money once we're on our own, we really will net about $5 million of what I'll call one-time money, that we will have more revenue than we had expenditure. Granted, from that point on, it's $1.1 million on your own going forward from that point. So there is a funding mechanism to help us get into the school. The other thing is these QSCAB bonds I always talk about. QSCABs it's a bond that the interest is federally subsidized. Now this is a little dated model. We're not looking at a $14.5 million elementary and the market's moved a little bit, but at that point we were projecting a $13 million savings if the interest was covered on that bond schedule. It will be something south of that because we won't be selling as many bonds as the market is, but obviously it's a significant amount of money.
Mr. Hutchison, what's the projected cost of this?
$11.5 million.
Thank you.
With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Dugan, who will talk a little bit about the boundary process around Elementary 35.
Just a quick warm-up to the boundary decision process and a reminder. In the 2004-2005 school year, the Board of Education adopted guiding principles that really were going to lead boundary decisions. So I put them up quickly as a reminder that part of the process recognizes and considers all students' academic, safety, social, and emotional needs. Enrollment numbers should enhance or support their learning environment for all students. We're seeking long-term boundary solutions, and we recognize the Board of Education's fiscal responsibility to taxpayers. So that will continue to be the guiding principles as we move forward in this decision-making process. Here's kind of how the process outlines. It's been currently reviewed internally by a boundary task force that's kind of an ongoing committee looking at some of the data John obviously has shown you tonight. So that process is already in place. Starting in the fall of 2013, we'll then include those principles from buildings that would be impacted in on that group, and we'll start to continue the discussion of what are the options for boundaries, what are we looking at, how do we implement these guiding principles for boundary changes and actually provide the relief these schools are going to need. That process is presentations at Ravenwood and Meadow Lane and Forest View. I didn't list that up there. They're site councils. And then we run community input sessions. We ask folks to come to us at those schools, and we present some options and some ideas. Our experience has been the community wants us as the educational folks to give some options. They typically ask, gosh, what are you guys thinking? What do you already have in mind? And we'll do that. We'll present those options and recommendations to the Board of Education for consideration, and then looking at board action early spring of 2014.
We'll take any questions.
On state and local funding issues, the CODA, new facility weighting, and the LOB authority, those have all pretty much survived all the budget cuts, and we feel very comfortable that they probably aren't going to be touched.
I feel comfortable. I believe that's safer than bond and interest fundings.
Mr. Hutchinson, that's all local dollars, is it not?
The new facility weighting portion is really a weighting in the state formula, but the CODA and ancillary weighting would also be a local levy.
Right.
Do we anticipate that any of the boundary decisions surrounding the new elementary might impact the Fairview attendance area?
I don't believe we anticipate that, but I'll let Dr. Dugan.
It's a great question. Internally, obviously they share a boundary and
Right.
kids, and so it'll certainly be, we've been talking about it. It certainly could be in one of the options. It has pros and cons, though, so it might certainly, once we start looking at all these options, be something in there. So it's not a definite no nor a definite yes. I think we're still open to that.
John, just to put the emphasis on the Q scabs, you were saying that we're budgeting $11.5 million as the cost of the school. And I just think, once again, for the public to understand that we're saying this was based on $14.5 million. So say we saved $9 million over the course of it. Say a present value weighting of that would make it $5 million or something like 5 or 6. So that half the school is being paid for basically by the Q scabs. And if I remember right, we're under a time crunch a little bit to utilize those Q scabs, which is one reason why we're making such a consideration to do this right now.
There's no hard and fast deadline, but we would need an extension from the state, just a concern whether after 3 extensions they would not advise that we give that up and let another district in the state have that authority.
And we'd have to request that extension when?
I believe it's November.
And then once again, the criteria moving forward, how quick do we have to have the?
On a Q scab construction is a 36-month schedule from the time you sell the bonds. You have to have the last dollar out the door, and that's well within the construction schedule.
Do we pull the building permits on a monthly basis?
We do. Chris Growlup monitors that, and we receive a summary.
So at this point in time, we're the first week of October. I assume we could get building permits issued in the month of August. And how soon are they available then for September? Is it a 30-day delay on that, Chris?
We just got the Lenexa building permits 2 days ago. We haven't got those on the park yet, but they should be coming any day. Usually that's 10 days into the new month.
And Olathe?
I mean, that's usually Olathe is 10 days into the new month.
Okay.
Overland Park and Lenexus is within 2 to 3 days of the new month.
Okay. I'm asking that question because there's a lot of construction, a lot of action in that part of the city, and we've got big numbers here already. I mean, big in comparison to what they were a year ago.
Correct.
So I would anticipate seeing what's going on, that trend might continue, and I'd want us to monitor those building permits.
Certainly.
I think, once again, I think it needs to be restated that by taking the action and approving the construction manager, we're basically given the go-ahead to build number 35.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that that's clear as mud.
All right, board members, are you comfortable going with the vote now? Okay. 6.04, approval of construction management proposal for elementary number 35. I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to accept the fee proposal for elementary 35 from Turner Construction Company in the amount of $303,683.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Mr. Poland and a second by Mr. Parker. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
Yes.
Mr. Shear,
Yes.
Ms. Ashley,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Mrs. Felter,
Yes.
Mrs. Martin.
Yes. Okay, that carries. 6.05, approval of...
Madam President, I think it'd be good to just comment on this right now, because basically we made the decision, but we didn't make it tonight. I mean, this has been a year in process. We've been studying this for over a year before we came to this, so it's important for the public to understand that with staff and board deliberation over the last probably 18 months, we arrived at this decision tonight, and it's a monumental decision, number 35 for the school district. But yet it was not done in haste. It was not done arbitrarily. It was done with a lot of thought and a lot of planning.
Thank you.
And if I were to summarize that real quick for you, I mean, to wrap up all your questions and what you've done tonight is, number one, it was in the 2007 bond issue, and I think the board was very strategic to hold and wait until you knew the right time to pull the trigger. And that time is now. We obviously have the need. The second thing the board has done has been to latch onto those qualified school construction bonds. Again, we're saving a tremendous amount of money on interest. Interest-free is how we're building this school. The next piece on it, it has dropped in price because of the climate and so forth. Greg has that pegged in at 11.5, lower than what was originally estimated. The bid that you just approved for construction management was a terrific bid. Again, we're hitting the climate extremely well right now. And so a lot of things that are very positive for dealing with the growth of our school district. And I think it's very positive.
All right, thank you.
In that regard to the fact that the bid for the construction management services was very competitive, as well as the next two agenda items, I'd appreciate it if Mr. Thomason could address that for all of the board members as far as how competitive that bid is and the level of service that we still expect out of that.
Well, I stand here tonight before you a very happy construction manager, let's put it that way. Before I forget, I would like to introduce you. Dave Dino, who is the Senior Project Manager from Turner Construction Company, is here tonight. He's the gentleman that will be supervising all of these projects for us, and I've only told him 3 times tonight how happy I am about it. Not only am I happy because of the fees, which were very competitive. We submitted RFPs to 5 different construction managers on our approved list. For the Technology Support Center, we submitted to 2 more new construction managers that were the first time on our list. And all the prices were extremely good. Turner Construction Company is is an international construction management firm, one of the largest in the United States, second largest in this region. And I feel confident that they'll be able to complete all of these projects. They have a different type business plan, different type construction manager, different type personnel than what we've seen from other construction managers, and they're really good. So, like I say, I'm very happy with them.
Could you briefly review for all of us the other projects that Turner has done in our school district?
In our school district, they worked on Ridgeview, which I list as one of the 5 most difficult projects we've ever accomplished in our school district. Even though it was small, that was basically rebuilding a school from an old school to a new school with classes still in session in that location. They did a great job. They did the work at Central, they did the work at Countryside and Indian Creek, both projects very similar to our 4 elementary school renovations that we're going to work on in this project. So I think they have experience here. They have experience in this region. I think we all know them. They're the Kauffman Stadium, Arrowhead Stadium, Speedway construction managers, but they also have built hundreds of small projects similar to ours in the last 10 to 15 years. So I think in all respects, we ended up with a very good construction management firm, expecting great things out of them.
2 things, Greg, while you're up there.
Yes, sir.
We're talking about the savings. I think it's fair to expose the public, probably may or may not have seen the bids and everything. And not only are we getting a quality company like Turner, but if I remember right, the total bid for all 3 packages they're going to do was probably about, 60% of the next lowest bidder?
It was about a little less than $300,000 under the total of the next.
So the savings continue in this construction marketplace, but we're not sacrificing the quality.
Absolutely
by
not. Absolutely
doing
not.
that.
You know, the resumes of the people we're going to get on the project are excellent.
And just some of the kudos, I live right behind Central, so I lived through the construction on that one. And I know all the staff over there just loved the people from Turner Construction, so we're expecting that to continue.
All right. Let's move on to 6.05 then. We'll vote on approval of construction management proposal for elementary renovations.
I am excited about this one. We're knocking off those classrooms without doors, one school at a time. Tonight, 4 schools. I'm excited about this. I would move to accept the fee proposal for elementary renovations from Turner Construction Company in the amount of $226,473.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Dr. Daniels and a second by Mr. Poland. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
The motion carries. 6.06, approval of construction management proposal for the Technology Support Center and Food Production Center addition. Comments, questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Just real quick, Dr. Barry, I think it'd be worthwhile reviewing with everybody why we're doing the Food Production Center also along with this.
You bet. Also a project, the Technology Support Center, that's been on the docket for quite some time, and a lot of studies gone into it in terms of a need for the district, starting with a task force prior to the 2007 bond issue. But since that building is being built on this campus, we also know that we have additional needs at our Food Production Center. Again, the continued growth impacts not only schools, but it impacts the services that we provide to all of those schools as well. And so being in the same proximity and having some savings from earlier bond projects, this was the time to do some simple additions for space, mostly storage space, to the Food Production Center. And so it'll be done under the same project and result in some savings for us.
Does that include the masonry issues?
It does. It will correct the masonry issue at the Food Production Center.
All right.
I'd like to say one more thing. Have we ever entertained doing like joint efforts with the city or the county, Johnson County Community College, other districts on projects like the tech center? I know in the past it hasn't always been a necessity, but I definitely think we need on our radar that we need to begin collaborating, sharing resources across lines that used to be pretty firm and, territorial. I think we're going to have to get really creative if the changes come that are proposed in the near future.
In the past 2.5 years, I've been involved with some discussions along with John on some potential things that we maybe could do with some of those institutions that you've mentioned. Nothing has played out, but yes, we're always aware of that.
Good. Well, and I know we usually collaborate well within districts, so I'm assuming, and we have a great relationship with our city, but I really would like that to keep that on our radar because I think it will behoove everybody to begin to start sharing resources like that.
Certainly.
Okay.
Okay, I would entertain a motion on 6.06, please.
I'll move to accept the fee proposal for the Technology Support Center and Food Production Center addition from Turner Construction Company and the amount of $146,304.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Ms. Felter and a second by Mr. Poland. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Motion carries. 6.07, white copy paper bid. Questions? All right, I would entertain a motion.
Move to accept the bid received from the Paper Corporation at $24.04 per carton for a 4 to 6 truckloads over a 3-month period of time.
Second?
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Mr. Poland and a second by Mrs. Ashley. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels? Yes. Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
6.08, approval of real estate broker services. I don't know, Dr. Berry, do you want to make some comments about this?
This is the ongoing project that we have that, again, prior to the '07 bond issue, a task force from the community involving some advisory councils as well gave input to the district that we should have a new building for our technical programs. The community was very supportive of that '07 bond issue, and so right now under construction on the North Campus is the Olathe Advanced Technical Center. So now we have the issue of Mill Creek, that as of late this next spring, or by summertime, we will be completely out of that building. As you know, we've tried to market that in the past on our own. Had a couple projects that went to the state that weren't funded, and so they fell through. But this would be the first time we would be, we sent out an RFP for commercial services to sell this building for us, and so that's what you'd be accepting tonight.
All right, questions, comments? Then I would entertain a motion, please. Don't be shy.
I move that we approve C.B. Richard Ellis as the district's real estate broker for the period of October 5, 2012 through October 4, 2013, with 2 additional yearly renewable options at the district's discretion.
Second.
Let's hope it doesn't go that long. All right, Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Ms. Ashley and a second by Mr. Parker.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Very good, the motion carries. 6.09, approval of financial advisory services. Comments, questions?
Well, either Dr. Berry or Mr. Hutchison, if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking the reason why we're going out and looking at RFP, some of the advantages of doing that at this time, and what we may be able to expect going forward.
This is an area that we had not really tested the market in many, many years. Decided this would be the best timing as we enter selling Q-scabs, which is kind of an interesting animal among the bond world, and Piper Jaffray actually has quite a lot of experience doing that. And with a pending bond issue, we know ultimately we're going to be going out again for a bond issue. This was good timing to do it before we go back out. Did analysis of who probably meets our needs the best. Areas of we have an interest in whatever we can do to increase our bond rating before we go out again. Very difficult thing to do. There are a lot of economic factors outside of our control, but would like guidance on what's the best things we should put in place to get there. And just a general expertise. We've become a large organization with differing financial needs, and we're looking for that right fit. And believe we found that.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion.
Well, I move to approve Piper Jaffray and Company as a district's financial advisor for an initial 3-year period with 2 additional year renewal options at the district's discretion.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Mr. Shear and a second by Ms. Ashley. Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
We made the introduction of a representative from Turner. We also have a representative from Piper Jaffray here tonight. Dustin Avey is a vice president with Piper Jaffray and would be working with our district.
Thank you for coming. On to our action items other. 7.01, approval of a water easement near Madison Place. Any comments or questions?
I'd move to grant an easement to Water One for water main extension near Madison Place Elementary School.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Mr. Parker and a second by Mr. Poland. Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Motion carries. The next is some board policy revisions. Comments or questions? Then I would entertain a motion.
I would move to approve board policy revisions as presented.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Dr. Daniels and a second by Mr. Scheer. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter? Mrs. Martin?
Yes. 7.03, approval of a date and time for a special meeting board study session. Dr. Berry, would you like to say a few words about that study session?
Typically, our district has had a study session in the fall to go over a number of topics that we can, again, share some information in a fairly efficient, fast manner, get reaction, feedback, and some guidance as we continue on through the school year on a variety of projects. I apologize a little bit for the timing of this one being October 23rd. The Olathe Public Schools Foundation breakfast is early the next morning, but we'll try to be finished by that time.
Questions?
I move that we approve a special meeting for the purpose of a board study session for Tuesday, October 23rd at 6 p.m.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Ms. Ashley and a second by Mr. Scheer. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
The motion carries. Future action items, it looks like we have 12 different items that you can see on your agenda. Are there any questions or comments?
I'd like Mr. Hutchinson to just quickly address 8.12, the modified cost plan on the Blue Cross, just so that as we're preparing for that, that everybody on the board and maybe the public can understand exactly or have some idea of what we're doing here.
Basically, what we're doing is Blue Cross Blue Shield has created a new program for school districts that allow them, under the new laws and regulations, Obamacare, there's basically some excise taxes and insurance taxes that would go into place. The district can save money on avoiding those taxes by restructuring the administration of that plan. It's totally transparent to the actual coverages are all the same deductibles. It's a matter of who carries the reserve. It has the same, what's called stop loss. We have no additional risk, but we hold that reserve on our books. Appears to be more self-insured, avoids those taxes, keeps that cost down about 2% from, and gets us a zero increase on our premiums.
Will you be able to answer questions about how Obamacare impacts our insurance here on the district?
I am not prepared to answer that, but I could.
Not tonight, I'm saying
Yes.
when we move on this, okay.
So would this reserve be potentially used up during the course of the year, of the contract year?
It really would not be, because there are some stop loss preventions in there. If we have claims that get too excessive, it becomes the burden of Blue Cross Blue Shield. If it's above, I believe, $150,000, they're very good at knowing what reserve levels you need. The same mechanisms they're using to tell us the reserve that needs to be maintained on our behalf but on their books would be in place on ours also. They're very good at trending, and while there are fluctuations up and down each year, it's virtually impossible to deplete that reserve because of those stop loss coverages that would kick in the event of major claims.
So what happens with this reserve? It just is there?
It's been there before. It's been there with Blue Cross. Had we terminated the agreement, that would sit there to handle runout claims, which is basically there are claims in the system that take a while to get through. That reserve sits there to cover those. In this case, in a kind of a financing way of that is transferred onto our books over the first several months of the new agreement, and that reserve sits on our books in the event that someday we change and say, we don't want this program anymore, we want to go to this other one. It's on our books then, handling for the same reason, run out claims at the end of the plan.
So this will be shown as restricted reserves
Absolutely.
on our balance sheet?
We'll have to set up a separate fund. It will be a cash balance in that fund, but a liability right down below for a net of zero. It is not a net asset to us.
Okay, thank you.
Can you give us an idea how much that will be?
Knew you were going to ask me that, and I believe it's 2.7, I think it's close to $3 million, but Dr. Litcher may recall quicker than I do about that.
Okay.
There were so many positives to this when it was presented to us. We kind of had to ask the question, why? How is this coming about? And it's purely designed for school districts. And it's because obviously we would like to keep the district as a client in the area, and they recognize the clientele that we are as a district. A number of other school districts in the area are also going to this plan, but it really is very positive for us that in the next plan year, we won't see any increase in premiums. And again, hold the reserve on our side. There's no more exposure for any of our employees. They won't see any difference at all in terms of the way it looks to them and the coverage and everything. So it's just extremely positive to be brought forward at this time.
But to your point, to John's point, is that there is an advantage of Blue Cross Blue Shield because they're not just doing this out of the goodness of their heart. Okay, so they are earning, by moving those reserves is a tax advantage to them, but it helps us in the long run, so it makes a big difference.
Because at the end of the day, they would pass that cost on to us.
Correct.
Yeah. Onto our teachers and our staff.
Certainly.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Increase premiums.
The 2.7 was not something that they are losing out on. Those were excise taxes and insurance fees. So.
Right. Yeah. Going along with the conversation we've had, because we worked so hard on providing a quality plan to our employees, and because this is such a big impact on them, I want to just really quickly read the last sentence on the thing here. This is strictly a financial structure change and in no way has any impact on the coverages, co-pays, et cetera, currently in place. So I just want to make that perfectly clear that it's strictly financial and we're not doing anything to sacrifice anything that the staff or employees would see. So
it has a neutral effect going forward. It's not like, well, second year that nothing's really changing in how future rates will be determined.
Well, but the one big point is that if we didn't agree to do this, there would have been a financial impact to the staff. Premiums would have gone up and things such as that. So again, there are some major advantages to this.
The school district, is it similar to business and industry? If an employee doesn't want to opt for our plan offered, if we offer one that meets the prescribed requirements, is there a government plan that they can opt to go with? Can you check that out for next month? Okay. Because we've talked to Blue Cross Blue Shield as well, and it sounds great, but ultimately someone's got to pay for the coverage, and the majority of our staff and employees will more than likely choose the government plan because it's more affordable for them and different coverages. So, our net effect with our business, it was great, but intellectually I know that the potential $200,000 that it looks like we might save, someone's got to pay that bill. So I would really like to know how it impacts the school district if we're similar to an independent business. Thank you.
I always like to have a review when we start seeing all the student trips come through as to what our policy is in regard to how many field trips individual students can participate in, how many days they can be out of school for field trips. This is kind of a mixed bag because field trips are typically a valuable experience, but students are taken out of the classroom, and that means they're missing out on the classroom experience. So, Mr. Green, could you review for us what the policy is as far as how many days of school a student can be excused for field trips?
You want that tonight or just next time? Or
I'm not asking for specifics other than just the general policy,
okay.
But if you don't know it from memory, yes, you can report to us back next time.
I'll report back.
Great, thank you.
That would be good.
All right, are we ready to move on? Every month, the board receives written reports. This month, we have the Head Start Monthly Director's Report, and we also received an annual report on student health services. I believe Mr. Parker requested a presentation at some point in the future on that report.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on 9.02. When you read that report and look at it, it is just an outstanding report, and it is a real resource for our students and our parents and our teachers in our community and our school. And I think it would be appropriate if our community was informed about that, and if we had a report on that next month, maybe, rather than us seeing it as a written report. I'm afraid it's just going to kind of get swept under the rug here, and our community not really realize how important that is and how much work our school nurses do. And I know there's been some discussion in the past about budget reductions, reducing our nurses in our schools, and this would be a good time for us to remind our public about how valuable of a resource they are to our students.
Certainly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is that something you will put on the agenda for next month?
We sure can.
Then I'd ask Dr. Berry also to share a little bit tonight in public our topics for discussion about, Dr. Berry does a good job for the public, keeping us board members informed anytime there's an incident at a school. And it just, I don't know if it's because we are made more aware of it, but it just seems like we have a lot more trips this year of people being taken to the hospital via ambulance. So I'd ask him to comment on the procedures and how that's authorized and everything like that. So if you're going to do a report, we can just include that in it if that's all right.
Okay.
And I was going to speak to the fact that these figures are the expense for the nurses. It doesn't count towards dollars in the classroom, and yet it greatly impacts those students in the classroom. Yeah. And so, it's a popular catchphrase to say we need to have 65% or more of our funding going to the classrooms, and that's wonderful, but you've got to have well kids, you've got to make sure everybody's immunized, especially with the percentage of children on free and reduced lunch. I assume that they would, a lot of times this may be their only medical care, easily accessible. I've had a daughter have an EpiPen, figure she probably got her life saved by Nurse Bennett, and so we often call her Saint Bennett, but it's critical, and so it's a bigger picture than just dollars in the classroom, and I just like to keep reminding the community of that.
And also, when you hear about the recent outbreak of meningitis, it's really critical that our students are up to date on their immunizations, and our nurses are the ones who really police that policy for us. Okay, topics for discussion. I believe we have a couple tonight. The first one has to do with election season being upon us, and I've asked Dr. Berry to give us a short presentation on our policy regarding staff and board member political activity, and then I thought perhaps the board might have some comments or discussions to make as well.
And presentation might be too strong a word, but I will certainly share what we do. And in fact, in the past couple recent months, when we've been together with all administrative staff, we talked specifically about the fact that this is political season. It's that time of year. And so, again, we reminded them very specifically, and Scott Mason does a nice job of this also in terms of answering questions and putting the information out there, that we as a school district do not use any school time, any employee time, any of our equipment, anything that would promote the candidacy of one political candidate over another. We certainly do not participate in that. That's the way they are instructed. Now, at the same time, we also tell principals, and they share with staff, that just because they are an educator, they don't give up their personal rights, so that on their own time, with their own money, with their own materials, they can do what they want to in terms of political candidates. But we are not to use school time, school materials to promote political candidates, and certainly not to hold students captive in terms of sharing thoughts and opinions about one candidate over another. In our school this fall, obviously, it's a very teachable moment that we have debates and elections, and that's a very good learning process for our kids. But we do it from a very neutral standpoint in terms of analyzing all sides.
Is there any policy as far as, you see all on the news, other school districts where a student might wear something that endorses a particular candidate? Is there anything about that as far as student dress?
I'm not sure it speaks specifically to student dress. I think if a student, and Scott, jump in anytime, I think of a student wanted to wear a button for their candidate, I don't think there would be anything that we would do, that's a free choice.
Yeah, we don't have a policy that would restrict that. That would be free speech. If it's political, if it's obscene or kind of crosses the line into something that's inappropriate, we would address it. But just advocating for a candidate, that's something they're allowed to do.
I have wanted to look into like wildcat ties or something like that.
That's obscene. So.
They're only outlawed during football season.
To some in here, it certainly is.
I think this was a little bit prompted by something that I had heard. It was brought to my attention, so I just called to the board's attention. I'd sent the same note out to every one of you. Did it in groups of two, so it didn't do the open meeting law violation or anything like that. But just remind us board members that we're held to a little bit higher standard, just to make sure that we pay attention to every little thing we do and not try to step over bounds. And like I said, we're reviewed a little bit harder and heavier than other people, so just walk that fine line very, very delicately. So
that's a good point. The same standard would be for you as it would be for our employees, that as an individual, you can support whoever you would like to, but you just could not state, Olathe School Board in terms of any endorsement of somebody, because that you don't speak for the entire board. So as an individual, you can do whatever you'd like to.
However, we do have legislative positions that we have approved, and I share those when I go to site council meetings, and I do encourage other board members to do the same and to encourage our communities to educate themselves about issues that are important to our schools and talk amongst themselves and research their candidates.
Excellent differentiation again between promoting a candidate, but certainly you're right, we do have positions that again would benefit the Olathe School District, and so that's why we take a stance on those. Very good.
Any more comments on that? All right, Mr. Scheer, you had an interesting question for me earlier today.
It's not quite as important as the 35th elementary school or the 5th high school. However, just want to bring it up. We moved the board meetings back some time ago as far as the meeting time, but we didn't change the comfort break. It seems as though, again, this is not as important as everything else, but it does seem as though we just get here and we've got a comfort break almost immediately. I don't know the process, the procedure. Do you change that? Do we have to have a board approval to change that? Is that something you could take a look at, Dr. Berry, and say, okay, do we want to make a change to this whatsoever? I don't know what's posted, what's not posted, and how we can make these changes.
Yeah, it's certainly at the discretion of the board in terms of the way your meetings are run. Many boards of education don't take a comfort break, but ours has always been designed because of having recognitions. It gives a break and to be able to get people from the lobby into the room and prepare for those things. So that's why it was designed. And then when you think about the time that it's designed for, many times it's kids. And so we want to get them in and out and back home to do homework or whatever it might be, but certainly could look at altering that in some manner.
You might just maybe in the next staff meeting put together some thoughts on that.
Certainly.
And then we can discuss it.
You bet.
We certainly want to be efficient with our time and respectful of the time of all the people who attend. Okay, and now comments from Dr. Berry.
Mr. Parker said it's always a good time to review like how valuable our nurses are, and somebody else made that comment too, in light of everything going on out there. May be positive, may not be timely with what I heard today. Just in general, in terms of our school district, I'm actually going to save some of this for our study session where we can look a little bit more at the state level. Am I kind of bouncing in and out on this?
Yes.
I did want to save the time tonight for me to make some comments about the state summit. I attended today in Topeka. Again, they're having this throughout the state, various meetings calling it a state summit. This is a second annual. It brings together the Kansas Association of School Boards, which our board is a member of, the Kansas Board of Regents, the Kansas State Department of Education, the commissioner was there today, and the United School Administrators. So it's the second year in a row that they've had this united conference to talk about education in Kansas, and well attended across the state today. And again, I'm going to share just very briefly with you, but they're talking about the new vision for Kansas in terms of education. There's an awful lot going on. I don't need to tell you necessarily about that. But let me share with you one thing that the manner in which they shared it, and have you actually think about this. We won't share out. But if I was going to ask you if it's for your kids, if you still have kids in our system, or if it's grandkids or grandkids who will be eventually in our system, or maybe they're someplace else in Kansas, what would you want for your kids when they graduate from high school? So if you think about that, what would you want for your kids or grandkids or the neighbor kids that you love? What would you want for them if they graduated right now when they graduate from high school? And the response that some people would share out, but how many of you thought of, this is what I want. I want my kid to be proficient on the state exam. It probably wasn't that. And so that's that new vision for Kansas that's coming. That's very important that we have our kids academically prepared. But there are so many other things right now that are so important to preparing kids for the future. And so that's part of this new vision that is going to talk about kids being college and career ready. And that's one and the same in terms of working on that. Again, I mentioned there are so many balls in the air for our educators in Kansas right now, but some of those are going to be, we have higher standards coming. The Common Core standards are higher standards. They are going to be more rigorous for us, but I think we can show time and time again, kids have stepped up to that bar whenever it's been raised. We have a new accountability model being brought. The state is working on that now, a new model in terms of accreditation, how schools will be accredited, and so that's a big piece for us. The next big piece is teacher evaluation and performance, teacher performance and how it relates to that. Again, state model being piloted now. Our district is doing some work. There are other models that are out there as well. The other two pieces that won't surprise you that they talked about an awful lot today is that it takes resources. And again, at the next meeting, I'll share some about the picture of Kansas that they painted today. And then it takes local leadership. And specifically, as you would imagine, those groups coming together, it's the local school boards, the administration in districts that can help provide some of that leadership. A couple of things I want to share that came specifically from our Kansas State Department of Education. What's been missing for the last couple of years in Kansas is a P20 council. It has gone away. P20 being preschool through college. Aligning those systems and having some coordination, and it's kind of exciting when they talk about that. The State Department is forming that on their own already now, and not at a government directive, to again work with the Kansas Board of Regents and groups in Kansas. State Board of Education will have at least 4 new state board members coming up from their election. They know that from people who are not running, so they know that they will have, they obviously don't know how the elections will come out, but they will have at least 4 new state board members. New science standards are set to go to the new board then, so that will happen within the next year or so, as well as new history and government standards. And they say sometimes those can be as challenging as science when we talk about those. The new teacher leader evaluation, trying to make that more uniform across the state. The KEEP program, again, that we are not a part of the pilot, but we're watching it closely. And then the last bit of news that we talk about, and Mary Matthew and others have been on top of this, the state writing assessment that is changing, and it's kind of on this in-between time between Common Core standards and what we currently have, and there will be another discussion at the October State Board of Education meeting that they may look at not requiring a writing assessment this year. Some districts are balking, saying we're not going to do it, there's no ramification, we'll do our own thing and we don't have to take the state writing assessment, but that will remain to be seen. But anyway, a lot of things going on right now in the state. I just wanted to share a couple updates. I'll be sharing some handouts with you and some more information at the study session.
That's it. All right. I believe we have set aside time for an executive session this evening. How many minutes do you think?
I'll say 30 minutes, please.
Then I would entertain a motion. 8:40.
Yeah.
I move that the board adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel and for the purpose of consulting with an attorney for the body or agency, and that board will return to the regular meeting at 8:40 p.m. in this room. The executive session is required in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed and to protect attorney-client privilege and the public interest.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Ms. Ashley and a second by Mr. Poland. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.